most people today consume ideas as identity accessories.
That's a very interesting phrase. Ideas as identity accessories.
Yeah.
I will now keep thinking about this. So this is your contribution today to my thinking. Perhaps it is to question what it means to say that this is my identity, because we are changing beings. I agree with you. I think contemplation is a bold and a radical gesture. It's not something passive and quiet. You can be friends with a person only if you can be bored with them. Time is stolen from us.
Raqs Collective, it evades fixed definitions. Even the word collective feels insufficient after a while. What does collaboration mean for you now, after all these years? Is it still a method, or is it a way of inhabiting thought itself?
Thank you. That's a lovely question. I think that we've been working together now almost 34 years. It's a long time. So me and my colleagues, Jibesh Bagchi, Monica Narula, we met as students in a film school here in Delhi, at MCRC in Jamia Millia Islamia. And initially we just wanted to enjoy the practice of working together, which is what you do as film students. So our working together based itself on our friendship and our conversations. And that's been a continuing situation. We've written somewhere that a collective is not an accumulation. It's not just adding by numbers. You have 1, 2, or 3 or 4 more people. It's more a disposition. So one has to think of it geometrically rather than arithmetically. It's where are the angles? So if we are a triangulation, the shape of the triangle moves. Sometimes it's very acute, sometimes it's isosceles, sometimes it's equilateral. So it's the balance of forces and weights between us and the conversation between us that keeps the triangle shaped the way it is, or changing its shape. So yes, collective is in that sense more an adjective rather than a noun. So it describes how we are and what we do. It doesn't say it's our name, but it's not a noun. It's an adjective or an adverb even. It's a collective method of working. So it's a procedure, and it's a procedure that lasted more than 3 decades. It's based on the idea that we're very different people as individuals, Jibesh, Monica, and I. And I think it's the difference between us and the way in which we approach all our questions and our queries and our desires differently that actually keep the conversation charged and flowing.
Right. You deal with, like you're talking, you deal with so many different things. Residue, fragments, traces. What draws you to what?
Yeah. So I think that the thing that occurs in any friendship, any relationship is that it changes, right? So one of the biggest factors influencing our life and work is time. So we give ourselves time. And it's time that allows us to think about the change of state of different materials, methods, ways of thinking or speaking. So nothing stays the same. You're never in the same river twice. So that attitude of watching time do its work and being a part of time doing its work and being a friend and an ally or intimate with time enters our conversation and our work. So all these things are fragments. I mean, something is fragmentary because you can never see it whole. Your attention is always on a part. And then your eye or your vision or your attitude moves and you get another part. So, and you try to combine various different segments into an ever-changing understanding of reality. It's the same with residues or traces. It's what happens when something transforms and there's a new thing that it transforms into and the old thing that's left behind. And that's the residue or the trace. So we're looking often at traces to understand how something has changed. And that's where all these things come from.
You're talking of time. We live in an age of immediacy, instant opinion, instant everything, instant response. Has contemplation, but your work demands slowness, and has contemplation become a radical act?
I completely agree with you. I think contemplation is a bold and a radical gesture. It's not something passive and quiet. Our name Raqs is a word that appears in various languages, in Urdu, which is closest to home, but also in Persian, also in Turkish, also in Arabic. And it suggests movement. It suggests a rotation. So it's हमारे यहाँ दरवेश होते हैं ना, the people who whirl or do meditative practices in dargahs. Their form of meditation often doesn't involve just sitting still. It involves dynamic movement. So it's a kind of dance. So Raqs is also a word for dance in Urdu. So it's what we have called kinetic contemplation. We're living in a very dynamic, very kinetic world. Everything changes all the time. And yet we have to find the means to contemplate. And I think that tension between things that move very rapidly and also very slowly at a glacial pace, but they move. So an act of contemplation that is sensitive to the question of change or movement is what we would like to identify as our basal attitude. That's why we are Raqs, or Raqs is Raqs.
So slowness is at the center of your...
Slowness...
Contemplation is something that may not be, or is it it is a radical act then?
Well, the question of speed is always relative. Slowness relative to what? We once did a work in a underground cave in the Arctic Circle where one of the materials that we were placing in an installation was a meteorite that's older than the Earth. So it's if the Earth is 4.5 or so billion years ago, then it is actually datable as being older. So it came from somewhere else. It was part of this solar system or somewhere else. And it came and hit the Earth at remarkable speed. And it's been there ever since. So it's been, it arrived some, not billions of years ago, but it arrived millions of years ago. But it itself was several billion years old object. So we could say that relative to the age of the meteorite, everything is fast. But the meteorite came here quite quickly. And at another level, what's a few million years? Nothing, We've been in these bodies as human beings roughly, some people say 150,000 years, 200,000 years. We know only about 5,000 years of recorded history that we are aware of. Someone said or did or said something or did something, some king was somewhere. But we have been in these bodies with this kind of consciousness for roughly, let's say, 145,000 years. It's a long time. But in another scale, it's a very short time. So I think what we are interested in is how time feels differently, depending on the question that you're asking about time. It can feel very slow, and the same thing can feel very fast, depending on what you're relating it to.
Right. Now, I want to understand your relationship with cities, especially Delhi. In your work, cities don't appear as geography, as mere geography. They are almost like psychic organisms, carrying fatigue, violence, and longing. How do you read a city?
Well, first of all, I'm born here. All three of us are born in Delhi, and I've lived all my life here. So has Jibesh. Monica has been in and out because her parents moved. But we are very much Delhi people, I think. And I think this city has formed us in many ways. So it's formed us in terms of, as you rightly say, in terms of the kind of desires that articulate this city. There's a very beautiful share by Mir, Dilli jo ek shahar tha, alam mein intakhab. Delhi was a city that was chosen in the world. Hum us ujde dayar se aate hai. We come from that forsaken land or forsaken city. So, and that produces this very interesting tension between the world choosing Delhi to be its kind of heart. Ghalib talks about this is the world and Delhi is its center, is its heart, right? So we are very aware of Delhi as being a kind of beating heart of the world. I mean, of course, there are other centers, but because we live in a spherical planet, every point on the sphere can claim centrality. So we think of Delhi as the center of our world. And it's a city formed by millions of people coming from different places, creating languages of belonging and desire together, and also having dreams about the future. So we live in different places in the city, but we come here to work in Shahpur, which is settlement that goes back to even the time of Alauddin Khilji, when the Mongols were attacking, and he set up a big defense here and apparently defeated the Mongol army. And that's why the walls of the fort of Siri, which we are surrounded by, we are enclosed within the ruins of Siri Fort, apparently have the skulls of, some people say 8,000, some people say 80,000 Mongol soldiers ground into powder used as the mortar. So this is a city founded on acts of violence, sustained by acts of violence, but also nurtured through acts of love and friendship and solidarity. So great cities in the world always have this tension. They have a history of violence and they have a reality of love and desire. And I think that's the tension with which we live.
Much of the contemporary discourse is centered around certainty and clarity. But your work is deeply comfortable, I must say, in ambiguity and unfinishedness. Right? What is it that ambiguity does that certainty cannot?
Well, I mean, again, it's a relationship to time. You can be certain only for a brief moment, right? And then the world changes. And if you continue to be certain after that, then you're a bit of end up looking foolish. So we are comfortable, as you very rightly pointed out, with ambiguities and also with hesitation, not jumping to conclusions very quickly, allowing time to do its work, to let a question breathe and not try and leap to the inadequate answer, right? So I think questions are much more important than answers. And 2026, 27 is actually 100 years of the declaration of what Werner Heisenberg called the uncertainty principle. So it's a term that's used in physics, quantum physics, and so on. So I think it's Heisenberg. I maybe could be wrong, but the uncertainty principle that we don't know the answer to a question, because the answer to the question is also dependent on who is asking the question. The same question can yield very different answers depending on where we are, who we are, why we are asking the question, right? So that's why ambiguity, hesitation, uncertainty, these are our friends in Raqs. And we rely on them to spur on our conversation because we are not sure of what we're doing. I mean, we are very resolved in doing the things that we want to do, but we never want to say, this is the answer. This is the definitive answer to a question. We would rather keep asking the question, and that fuels the artistic as well as the intellectual journey that we're on.
Has the digital age fundamentally altered our inner lives? Not just attention spans, but our capacity to reflect, to think.
Well, every new technology that has to do with information and communication produces some alterations and transformations. When writing started becoming popular, in the Platonic dialogues, you can see Socrates deeply mistrustful of writing. He'll say that if people keep writing, they will never remember anything, right? So the inner life of memory will be depleted and impoverished because you can now write down your thoughts and don't have to remember them. So from that to the printing press, to digital technologies, to the presence of the internet in our lives, I think that all these technologies become a bit like prosthesis for our consciousness. They're like the spectacles that I use to see or read between distance and proximity. So the digital devices that we use are a little bit like that. They become a repository for our inquiries and our thoughts. So we say ki acha Google kar leta hu. Like this is a substitute for memory. But although it is a substitute for memory, it is also at the same time tapping into the collective imagination of all of humanity for all of the time that it has been human. So when we are Googling for an answer, or when we are using an artificial intelligence agent, it's actually that agent is created through a parsing of all human consciousness that has been recorded, right? So when I'm asking a question, let's say about the Pythagoras theorem, it's already there. I'm just retrieving it from the commons, from the pool of common human culture. So that process of retrieval and that process of give and take is much quicker, much faster now. That's what has happened. So that speed and the idea that you can have a form of relationship to consciousness that is abstracted out of you into something that is a device which pools in all of this collective unconscious humanity, that changes things. So I am less interested in attention spans because that fluctuates. That will readjust itself. People will know how to have longer attention spans after a decade or so. But what's interesting is that this process of having all the world's knowledge, recorded knowledge, not unrecorded knowledge, whatever's been ever written down, at one's fingertips, completely alters the way we think about consciousness.
Raqs moves across mediums so fluidly. Film, text, installation, philosophy. Do you think ideas themselves resist disciplinary boundaries?
Do ideas resist disciplinary boundaries? Absolutely they do. Because there is no partition in our consciousness that says ki yahan pe jo hai na, yahan pe aapki, here exists your emotional life, here exists your interest in mathematics, and there exists your weakened spatial temporal consciousness of the world, and these are the poems that you remember from childhood. There is no such architecture of walls in our consciousness. And I deliberately use the word consciousness and not the brain, because the brain is just one of the organs of cognition. It's not the only one. I mean, there are important concentrations of the nervous system in your gut, around your lungs and heart. Some of the biggest concentration of nerves are in your gonads. So all of these are also things that contribute to our thinking and our feeling. So it's ridiculous to say that if you're feeling butterflies in your stomach, that's because the butterflies have emanated from that chamber and have now started fluttering. It's because your entire body and all your memories are together producing some sensation. So ideas are a result of this. Ideas are sort of images produced by our consciousness. Sometimes we know what we feel even though we don't have the words or the language for it. That's an idea that hasn't articulated itself as language, but it exists. So, and it's very difficult to say, does this idea begin here or end here? What are the boundaries of an idea? So I think that fluidity of the ideas is a basic fundamental feature of what it means to be human. And as artists, it's a gift to have that fluidity available. Yeah.
Sure. Your work creates spaces that make time feel like layered rather than linear. Are you consciously trying to disrupt the conventional experience of time?
Yes, we're trying to disrupt the conventional experience of time. Yep. You're absolutely right. Because I think that this, what we accept consensually as a conventional experience of time, that one thing just follows another and then another thing follows this, impoverishes our experience of life, both at a very basic emotional level and also intellectually, also analytically. It is possible for people to feel more than one thing at a time. And those feelings can progress at different rates. So your feeling of hunger, for instance, advances upon you as you retreat from the last time you've had food. So we all know what it means to say, I am feeling more hungry, right? Which means that you were feeling less hungry before. Your feeling of impatience or patience, or your ability to recall a name, all of these fluctuate over time, which means that there are, at any given moment, there are different temporal movements happening in our consciousness. Some are happening at a glacial speed, some are happening at the speed of lightning. So if we want to take stock of all of these things, we have to evolve a much more sophisticated picture of temporal processes, not like one measuring tape with different gradations, but sometimes as a labyrinth, sometimes as a honeycomb, sometimes as something that's like a blanket that's folded in on itself. So our work at all times is to try and create these things. So that's why we create clocks, which are also libraries of feeling, right? Or we have recently started with clocks that index the moon and lunar sensations. We tend to think of time in much more solar ways in terms of the division of the day by the hours that are produced by an observation of the sun. But if we started thinking of time in a lunar way, which is the time of the month, which is a phrase that all women know what it means, right? And these different attitudes to time make us feel differently. And so I would say, yes, our task is to disrupt the conventional understanding of time, because time is stolen from us. The production of the working day, which is an invention of industrial capitalism the last 200-300 years, has meant that we always feel short of time. आप किसी से भी पूछ लीजिए, do you have enough time? They will say no. Nobody has enough time. So obviously there is some deprivation of time that is happening in our lives. अभी हमारे मुल्क में ना 4 new labor codes are coming in, and they are extending the working day beyond the 8-hour limit that was set 100 years ago or so. And now more time is going to be stolen from you. And it's already happening in all the big media and corporate houses. So it's like there is a new understanding कि जितना time तुम दे सको to the profession that you're in or the work that you're doing, the better it is. That's why you have people like Narayan Murthy, ना, वो बोलता रहता कि और बढ़ाओ घंटे काम के. That's time theft. He is arguing for a theft of time. And that's the emerging consensus. So our work is to say, nahi, time ki chori nahi karne denge hum.
That's what, interests me about Raqs, that the work feels more intellectually rigorous without becoming emotionally cold. So
Yeah, I think.
How do you see emotion within conceptual practice?
I think you cannot achieve intellectual rigor without giving respect and attention to our emotional landscape.
Yeah.
Those who try to do so produce thought that is arid and cold, doesn't really sustain itself. So our interest has often been in thinking about awareness itself as a subject of contemplation. We've called it the awareness of awareness. There's a term in Buddhist philosophy, Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, which is called Swayam Samvedana, reflexive awareness. The metaphor that's often used is a light in a room. When you turn on a light in a room, it illuminates the room, but also reveals itself. It says, "Here I am. This is my light," and that is at a very fundamental level. First of all, it's a feeling. You feel that you are a being in this world, right? Yeah. And that feeling itself is the bedrock of every thought and every feeling, every other feeling that you have. So paying attention to that fundamental source of feeling and whatever it is, emotion or intuition, is part of thinking. And we try to think in a way that is resonant with how we feel, and we try to feel in a way that we can think with.
Your work resists spectacle. Yeah, but in a time when visibility is everything, how do you protect depth from performance?
How do we protect depth from performance? It's a very, very profound question. By performing depth.
Wow. How do we do that?
We've been very interested. There are two figures that appear a lot in our work. One is that of a diver, a deep sea diver, right? And the other is sometimes a mountain climber or an astronaut. So anyone who takes you away from the surface. So we have a work called Deep Breath, which is actually about the awareness of what it means to breathe when you dive, right? And so there are 3 deep sea divers going to the bottom of the seafloor, and they find a phrase called the forgetting of air. So the one thing you can't do when you're diving is forget air, because breathing is a condition that you have to learn again. One of us, Monica, has had experience with deep sea diving, and she returned, she always talked about how to calibrate breathing. So the performance of depth is an achievement. You have to learn how to do it. You can't just dive deep under and then come out, because you have to even learn how to come back to the surface. No, otherwise you get these things called bends, and it can injure you for life. So a resistance to spectacle means that you're resisting the flash of attention. That lightning flash that suddenly produces a glare that blinds you to everything but itself. But it blinds you. We are more interested in illumination and in the shadow that takes time to get adjusted to. So when you enter any space, it takes some time for your eyes and your ears to get adjusted to the space. Anyone who studied recording like you have, we talked about the hum in the space, right? Which you probably can hear in the recording. But that's what's the room tone. And even if that hum were taken away, there would still be a tone. There would still be, in a dark room, your retina would adjust to the darkness and perhaps your pupils would expand and dilate and take in more light. It's what happens with the camera. You open the aperture to bring in more light. So this process of opening, dilation, of being more finely tuned to the ambience is what we are more interested in than the flash of the glare, let's say, right? So there are different processes of perception. Glares are great because they illuminate darkness instantly. That's why you have even the term enlightenment. But enlightenment can be an ongoing process rather than the moment's flash of lightning. And that ongoing process is what we hope to be discovering as we age.
We're talking about enlightenment. So I just want to ask, I wonder that do artists have to explain themselves more today, politically, morally, ideologically, whichever way? Does contemporary culture still allow opacity?
I would hope so. I mean, we resist trying to explain our work. I'm having a conversation with you, but it's not an explanation of anything that we've done. It's more the ideas that come from the work that we are actually traversing between you and me right now. I'm not trying to tell you this is the meaning of this work or this is the meaning of that work. We never do that. Even in our extensive writing practice, we don't say that this work means this. Coming back to your question about ambiguity, the work should be able to speak for itself and change what it says ambiguously over time. The same work that we did in 2002 reads very differently now, and that's absolutely right. So we try not to explain ourselves. And there is a misconception that floats around our practice that it's very cerebral. It's not. It's very instinctive. So we've always tried to work in a way that should be accessible, let's say, to a 7-year-old, should be accessible to your mother or your grandmother, should be accessible to a philosopher, should be accessible to someone who plays football, right? So there are different points of access and exit into our work. And they're not hierarchical. It's not as if one person has a better understanding of the work depending on how many books they've read or whatever it is that they've done. It is that every point of entry and access is its own legitimate mode of understanding. So actually, we write a lot, but it's never about a work in order to try to tell the world what it means. It's to create a dense forest around it, which sometimes renders the work more rather than less opaque. We're not writing to make the work more difficult, but we're writing to resist some demand for transparency. There are enough demands for transparency in the world anyway. You know, you jahan bhi jao aap Aadhaar card dikhao apna. हमें नहीं दिखाना आधार कार्ड का.
Since you brought this up, most people today, they consume ideas as identity accessories. Mm-hmm. So how do you continue to think honestly?
That's a very interesting phrase. Ideas as identity accessories. Yeah. I will now keep thinking about this. So this is your contribution today to my thinking. Perhaps it is to question the response that I would have is to question what it means to say that this is my identity. Because we are changing beings. And producing a jacket that you can wear of identity is useful only if you can also take it off. When the weather changes, you take off the jacket. Or when the jacket gets frayed and is no longer wearable, then you take it off. It's not an eternal straitjacket. So our response to the question of identity is often to insist on the contingency of identity, that identities are constellations of momentary practices, momentary representations of the self. And so, if that is so, then we don't need to embellish and ornament something that is momentary. So ideas do not become then, what did you say? The
identity accessories.
Identity accessories. Ideas can emerge from what you feel like when you take on a particular identity. So if at a certain point of time I become conscious or aware of my, let's say, class and caste position, my gender role, then that should be a means to think about who I am becoming in order to create distances from those caste and class positions, or to find new identities. Like, I don't think everybody inhabits the same landscape of desire through their life. You change what you desire, or your desires change. So even the words, heterosexual or homosexual, these can be seen more as contingencies in terms of the things you do rather than the person you are. And that's true of every other thing. I mean, the moment someone who breaks a ritual taboo does so, they are actually in some ways challenging the rules of what are caste. 150 years ago, a conversation between an adult woman and an adult man in this part of the world in this way would have been impossible. The identities of our great-grandparents were different from the identities of who we are as adult beings today. So if we carried on with the same accessory to the identity that our great-grandparents had, as if nothing had changed, we would not be able to sit and have this conversation.
Right. Now you've given me, something to think about. Yes, I never thought about it like that. Although this this phrase has been going on in my mind for a while, in other conversations also, identity accessories. But yes, this is a new perspective you've given me, and I have something to think about now.
Yeah.
So, taking it from there, you talked about taking us back in time. I want to talk about boredom and drift and waiting. Most culture would label them as failures. But much of the higher and deeper thinking comes from these conditions.
Absolutely. We were trained as documentary filmmakers, and being a documentary filmmaker means you have to sit and wait or stand and wait, actually, behind the camera for very long periods of time, waiting for things to happen. Right? Reality doesn't process itself and produce itself. Here, now I am ready, please shoot. Things take time. Life takes time. So I like being bored. I enjoy it because I'm often traveling. I often find myself at airports or railway stations or bus stations waiting for my flight or my train or my bus. And that condition of waiting, which is like a limbo time, nothing's happening, is a delicious time for me because I get to observe the jeweled array of humanity around me. Everyone reveals themselves when they wait because they're not performing, they're just waiting. So some aspects of their self actually come out when people wait. So, and I think of myself as a very boring person. I'm not exciting. And I like being with things that are boring because we give each other the time to breathe. We don't have to sit up and say how amazing we are.
Okay, since you're saying that you like being bored and boredom is something that makes you think and look around, and what is the role of friendship in intellectual space. And I'm not talking about networking or collaboration as economy. I'm talking about friendship as a mode of thought.
You can be friends with a person only if you can be bored with them.
Wow.
Together.
Okay.
I mean, we live at a time when there's a high value on extracting things from people, right? But I think that the true definition of friendship for me is if you can be with a person, not say very much, not do very much, not always do what I call fun things, but just hang around each other. And I think the driving force that impels Raqs Media Collective, I can still think back to a time in Delhi in the early 90s, for instance, when we had lots of power cuts. And when the power went out, there wasn't much you could do. So I remember a very hot summer, the power's gone, Jivesh, Monica and I, because you could do nothing, you just lie on the floor staring at the ceiling, waiting for the fan to move, right? Nothing could be more boring than that. It's intolerable to do that with some people. But it's okay to be able to do that with some others. And then something begins to happen between you at that edge of boredom and awareness, where the conversations that you can sustain that begin at that time and that can sustain are real conversations. They're not, naam ke vaste, faltu sort of stuff that we talk about in order to feel important. Whatever you say when you're really tired and bored is of some lasting significance. And that's where friendships form.
Is there an idea you've repeatedly returned to over decades without fully resolving it?
The meaning of time. It's there in everything we do. We are conscious of it. We return to it. The meaning of the passage of time.
Okay. What kind of conversations do you think should exist more in the current cultural landscape of India?
Well, I think we could try and step back a little bit from the obsession that we all have with the current affairs. I mean, that's important. It's important to register the fact that a place that you felt would have resisted the rise of the far right succumbed yesterday. It's important to think about that. But it's also necessary to think beyond that. It's not to be consumed by whatever is on the news cycle for the moment, but to think in terms of long-term possibilities. I mean, I am at some fundamental level an optimist. I think that despite all the terrible news that we hear in the world around us, that the processes that are actually animating human beings are moving towards more interesting directions. It's just that we never give them we don't have the patience to pay attention to them. So that's why we get consumed by the gloom and doom of the news cycle, right? So if we have that patience, then it's interesting to think about what is actually stirring sort of tectonically underneath your feet, and to be aware of. So there's a work of ours called An Afternoon Unregistered on the Richter Scale. The Richter scale is the device that allows you to measure the intensity of an earthquake. So it's based on the idea that when an earthquake happens, you know that the earth is active. But actually the earth is active all the time. There are tectonic movements happening all the time. I mean, I'm very fascinated by the idea that the Himalayas are still rising, like millimeter by millimeter, and you can measure this rise. Or that the Indian landmass is still subsiding underneath Asia at a certain rate, some 4 inches per year or something like that. So the whole earth is moving, it's agile. we have to have the patience to be aware of the movements that don't get registered on the Richter scale.
Do you think contemporary society, does contemporary society still have spaces where people can change? We're talking about tectonic moves and all. So I was just tectonic movements. So I just wanted to ask you this. Does contemporary society still have spaces where people can change their minds slowly and privately without making the change public?
I hope so. I mean, I write a lot on social media. So people think that I'm putting myself out there all the time. They have no idea about the things that I don't write. Right? So there's lots of things going on in my mind and in my consciousness that I don't feel compelled to reveal in public. Each waits their time. It's not that they will always remain intensely introspective or personal. Perhaps there will be a time when some of them will attain forms of publicness. And also between the three of us, there are conversations that keep happening and returning to things that we've thought about earlier, because our thoughts are being marinated, being fermented, right? So I think that there is space and time. One has to make space and time. It doesn't happen if you let consciousness sort of be its own thing. I mean, just as you have to read in order to keep your mind alive, or you have to walk in order to keep your circulation system running, working in working order. Similarly, I think with thinking, that there has to be a cultivation of how we think and the pace at which we think, in order for the right time, to be aware of the right time to make that transition from private thought to public articulation.
Your work leaves room for the viewer to wander rather than arrive at conclusions. Do you distrust conclusions?
No, I distrust conclusions that are not conclusions and pretend that they are, which I see a lot of. I think that there are definite, so now to flip the argument of ambiguity on its head and say that there are things that we can say with some certainty, but they have to be arrived at. Time has to be given to them to ripen and mature, rather than relying on snap judgments. So the mind wanders, as it must, as it should, and our work gives the wandering mind its freedom, or welcomes the freedom of the wandering mind. There's a work by us which is a large magnified handprint, an inked handprint. It's called Unique, The Unlikely Intimacy of Digits. And it's a play on UID, which was the unique identification database that is producing the identity documents that all of us now carry, which are distillations of your biometrics, your fingerprints, and your retinal scans. But so this is a hand that keeps counting notionally to infinity. So every time it's on, it's counting further. And it's trying to count the uncountable. Yes. It was on show at the National Gallery of Modern Art when we had a large exhibition there called Untimely Calendar. And there was a security guard who really loved this work. And I would find him at a spot where he would always, he had to move his locations because he had but he would always find a place from where he would be able to see this work. And I asked him, "Aapko isme kya nazar aata hai?" So, and he said, "Ki bahut kuch nazar aata hai." That the hand could become gestures that point to so many different kinds of things. And he would say animals. So he pointed out to me the right now when the hand is like this, it's like a kekra, like a crab. Right now it's like a rabbit. Right now it's like a mouse. So he had this entire bestiary kind of population of the natural world in his consciousness that he was enjoying thinking about and watching while looking at the hand. I mean, it's the same propensity that makes people create the first pictures in the world are actually constellations of the stars. So when we say कि ये Scorpio hai, it's not, there is no relationship between those particular stars that form that zodiac sign, except that we have created an image in our mind. That's the wandering mind and its magic, which lasts for, thousands of years. So yes, I love it when people say that the work gives them the time to wander in their consciousness.
Finally, what are you currently thinking of obsessively, even if it has not become work yet?
A couple of things. We're in a process of long conversation with the space in a university in Scandinavia, where we have been tasked with bringing a public commission to fruition. And so we're thinking a lot about what it is that people who are scholars, who are professors, who are research students, who are scientists, who are librarians, and the people who clean the university will pass by on their daily rounds. So we've been looking at the ruins of university sites. So we recently spent some time in Nalanda and the ruins of Nalanda, and we learned the different shapes that were designated to acts of reflection, that is thinking, and memory. So a square was a place to meditate on. A circle was a place to remember. So there's no reason why a square is better for meditation and a circle is better for memory. But somebody made up this system. So it's an interesting thing to think about. The relationship between geometry, the difference between a square and a circle, and different attitudes to thinking about and being with the world. It's an idea that we're interested in right now. Or we're thinking about, again, how constellations, how the night sky becomes a guide, becomes your friend if you're a traveler trying to navigate the world, with or without GPS. Because even the GPS that we all rely on to get from one place to another comes to us from a satellite circling the planet. So it's some relationship between what is in this atmosphere and what is beyond the atmosphere. So that's something that we're thinking about right now. We're also going back, trawling through our own archives, because we've just been asked by the Asia Art Archive, which is a place in Hong Kong, to reflect on what we were doing when we were 25 years old. Because they are approaching their 25th anniversary, and they've invited some artists to think about that quarter century time of youth. So we've found an average of between the three of our ages as to when the average of the constellation of Raqs would have been 25. And it takes us back on a journey that we made to the Andaman Islands by ship. And we're looking through all our notes and our photographs and our recordings and the things that we collected in and around this journey to try and understand this relationship between an archipelago and a mainland, between the histories of photography and the histories of war, between the phrase that you use, ideas as what is it? Accessories to identity.
Yes.
And I think that this entire project was about ideas as accessories to identity and an examination of that process. That's something we're thinking with right now. So soon my colleague, who is our designated archivist, will come to the studio. We will open this trunk, and all these materials are from that voyage.